Shantae has always been the little series that could. What started out as a cult classic on the Game Boy Color has since grown into one of the most beloved and steadfast indie series out there. And steadfast is perhaps the most apt word because after a certain point, the game stopped feeling all that unique. If someone picks up a Shantae game, they know what they're going to get, and despite Shantae Advance Risky Revolution's origins as a lost Game Boy Advance sequel to the original, there's nothing in this game that really changes that viewpoint. That could be a good or bad thing depending on your perspective, but Shantae Advance as it stands is another solid entry for this half-genie hero. The story once again centers around the pirate Risky Boots and her plan to plunder Sequin Land. This time she has dug beneath the island and attached rotors to key points, which then twist the island along the tectonic plates, essentially turning landlocked towns into coastal ones so she can easily plunder everyone. In order to save Sequin Land, Shantae must travel the island, reverse the damage, and rescue 3 relic hunters who may be able to find a permanent solution to Risky's revolutionary idea. The story is ridiculous enough to fit with past games and certainly facilitates the new central gimmick, but what I can truly commend is the character writing. WayForward has this cast and their personalities down to a T at this point. The cheeky wordplay, the interactions, and all the crazy new characters they bounce off of is always a treat, and what's all the more impressive is how this slots neatly between Shantae and Risky's revenge. There's not that much continuity to be found, but I did enjoy how Zombie Girl Roddy Tops is still new to the group, and there's a small subplot going over her friction with Bird Girl Sky. Namely that Sky can't really trust a zombie. There are other nods and winks to how the game was supposed to come out years ago, but it's a breezy story that's entertaining all the way through. The gameplay is also exactly what you'd expect from Shantae at this point. She can attack with whips of her hair, collect money, and then purchase spells and upgrades to make the trek easier. These can range from making her hair whips stronger to the usual trio of attack spells, the Fireball, the Thundercloud, and the Pike Ball. A magic meter ticks down with each use to ensure they aren't spammed, but enemies drop refills frequently enough that it's rarely an issue. As Shantae explores Sequin Land, she'll discover transformations that will allow her to reach new places and overcome certain obstacles. These range from the monkey to a crab to an elephant, and while past games have struggled with making these snappy to swap between, Risky Revolution nails the method, especially when the amount of buttons available are the same as the Game Boy Advance. But by holding the right trigger and pressing a direction or face button, she'll instantly transform into one of the 6 available. It helps keep exploration moving at a quick pace. There's also a quick select for her magic and inventory, though while the addition is appreciated, it's less than ideally implemented. Again, there's only so many buttons to work with, but a slow rotation through all the options would often bog me down, or I'd miss what I wanted to select completely. Often when things were at their most hectic, it was just easier to swap from the pause menu. It's just a lot when there are 8 different spells and 4 helpful items. There are new spells to try as well, which allow Shantae to multiply herself to double her damage output, or even duplicate any gems she earns at the expense of constantly draining magic meter. But it makes grinding for money all the easier if you want those upgrades as soon as possible. Otherwise, Shantae can find heart containers to extend her life and upgrades to the transformations, often allowing them to attack in that form. But the main gimmick of Shantae Advance is the level rotations, which only really come into play in 3 areas. The game follows a formula of Shantae encountering 2 towns that have swapped places, which then leads to a 3rd location where the next relic hunter is being kept. These levels loop around in one big circle, but Shantae can enter the background with special doors that literally add more depth to the proceedings. Figuring out how to reach certain places with these doors becomes a puzzle unto itself, especially when Shantae eventually finds the device that causes the rotation. By pressing it, the locations these doors lead to shift and open up even more possibilities. Each of these main levels holds a mini-dungeon where transformations are often held, and a main dungeon which plays out in typical Shantae fashion, rarely using the background or rotation gimmicks. Some of the bosses use these ideas, but they tend to be infrequent. The idea feels ripe to explore even further, though what is here does help it stand out from past games and provides a solid identity. Navigating is the name of the game, and the transformations help make that less of an issue, which in turn provides them more value. As for the dungeons themselves, they're all fine, nothing that stands out in any real way, but fun in their own right. I did like the addition of Roddy Tops, who acts as the game's shopkeeper, being found in each one, making return trips to Shantae's hometown less necessary if you want to power yourself up for the next section. That being said, while I was playing, I kept having one pervasive thought. I've done all this before. None of it's bad and I enjoyed the game as a whole, but I also wasn't wowed by it. Now, part of that is likely due to it sticking to the limitations of the GBA, but I think Risky Revolution emphasizes how much Shantae as a whole needs some kind of shakeup. The formula is well worn at this point, and I want to see what else WayForward could do to evolve Shantae's gameplay. Even the transformations aren't exactly that new. It feels like going through the motions. The game certainly looks nice though. For the console release, WayForward upped the quality of the character portraits and sprites. It feels like how one would remember a Game Boy Advance game, though with some fancy new UI bells and whistles. The main mode makes it feel more in line with the presentation of the modern games. However, there is a GBA mode that emulates what it'd be like on the classic handheld, and that's pretty much the only difference. It's nice to have there as a feature, but I didn't find myself invested in playing again in that mode. Speaking of, there is a bonus mode to unlock if the game is beaten with 100% completion. I wish it was easier to track what I still needed to find though. The main collectibles are secret squids that do nothing. They are merely there as a challenge to collect. But it's only at the end of the game do NPCs tell you the numbers of these squids you could expect to find in the various sections of the main levels, and by that point I had no idea how many I had found where, making it necessary for me to scour everything again because Shantae Advance also lacks any kind of a map. I should note that the Deluxe Edition includes 3 exclusive costumes for Shantae that slightly change the gameplay, and these will not be offered as DLC. Each one powers up one of her main attack magics, and that's about it. The unlockable costume is essentially a magic mode where she takes more damage but has twice the magical output, so there is replayability if you find yourself interested in these other challenges. There's also the new battle mode, which is honestly not all that impressive. I do find the super tiny sprites endearing, and the core mechanics are fine. Essentially, 2 to 4 players fight it out in a randomized arena that rotates on occasion. Each one has blocks that can be smashed for power-ups and spikes that you want to launch your opponents into. Smaller attacks can be used to stun opponents, while a charge attack will send them bouncing all around. I'm sure with the right group that the mode could be a fun time, but there are some truly baffling decisions in its structure. For one, there's no option to change your character. Player 1 is always Shantae, Risky is always player 2, and so on. Why can't I pick my favorite? And even more baffling for the Switch version is that it doesn't support a lone Joy-Con. It has to be a Pro Controller or the Joy-Con as a pair. I don't understand this limitation unless it's due to the origins as a Game Boy Advance game. But even still, why wouldn't you tweak that to be an option? Presentation-wise, the game again looks exactly as you'd expect and is generally pleasant to look at. The music is solid throughout, and while not every song was fantastic, there were a handful that made me sit up and pay attention. However, this is the first time in a Shantae game where I encountered significant glitches. Not only did the game outright crash once, forcing me to retread a bunch of progress, but at one point Shantae started slowly running out of the doors. I have no control here. I simply had to wait for her to reach the threshold, and then I could continue on. I believe it happened because I collected a gem while going through a door, but I have no solid idea. That also doesn't explain why I suddenly clipped through the level in that same dungeon and was stuck within the walls. If I didn't happen to have the exit area item, then I would have had to reload my last save. Thankfully, exiting the dungeon solved the issue, and I had no further problems when I returned to finish my cleanup. Look, if you love Shantae, then I have no issue recommending Shantae Advance Risky Revolution. It's a game that delivers exactly what you expect and is amusingly fun the entire way through. But if you've grown weary of her formula, there's not much here that will change your mind. Personally, I find I'm somewhere in the middle. I love this world and these characters, I just wish they got to do something more unique. It's for this reason that I'm awarding Shantae Advance a 7.5 out of 10. There are some excellent refinements to be found, but don't expect a grand revolution. Maybe the next Shantae, unbound from its GBA origins, will be the true next step for the series. At least, that's my wish.